Good afternoon, everybody. This is auspicious day for the George Warren Brown School of Social Work. It's a beautiful day, and I'm honored to be here with my dear colleague, Tonya Edmond, to start doing this. So this is Tonya, my dear estimate colleague. We are so grateful to be able to welcome you in person to the installation of Professor Brett Drake as the Professor of Data Science in the Social Good in Practice. For those of you that don't know me, I am Rodrigo Reis. I am the interim co-dean of the Brown School and a professor of public health at the Brown School. I am honored to be here with you all today, along with my fellow, and again, I will ask her to stand up now that everybody's seeing her, co-dean Tonya Edmond, who will be introducing Brett shortly. Thank you for joining us today, whether you are in person or virtual. Endowed professorships are among the highest honor Washington University can bestow on a faculty member. It reflects our deep appreciation for the profound contributions the recipient has made to Washington University, the field of research, and society. Brett is part of a large community of individuals at Washington University and the George Warren Brown School of Social Work, who hold endowed professorships and other positions, recognizing their extensive work in their field of study. With today's installation, we recognize Brett's important work in the field of data science. The school has endowed this professorship because of the importance of utilizing data science and technology to advance the social good. We know data science is extremely important in our professions and have elevated data science and technology as a strategic priority in our strategic plan driving equity 2030. Brett is a leader at our school, committed to advancing our capacity to train students in methods in our ability to make data accessible for both. For both internal and external research. Brett is also leading the way for how we use big data in the practice field of child welfare. I would like to begin by welcoming Brett's friends and family who are here. Please help me in giving a warm welcome to his wife, Melissa Johnson-Reed, their kids, Harrison, his wife, Shirlene, and Thomas as well. And also to close friends, David Cronin and Harriet Switzer, Dr. John Constantino, Ellie and Sean Weidman as well. Additionally, to celebrate today's installation of Brett Drake as the Professor of Data Science for the Social Good and Practice, I'm honored to be joined by the Washington University Provost, Beverly Wendland, and Vice Provost, Mary McKay. Now, please join me in welcoming my co-dean, my friend and colleague, Tonya Edmond, to the stage to introduce Professor Drake.
Thank you, Rodrigo, for your warm welcoming remarks. It is now my distinct pleasure to recognize Professor Brett Drake. Brett has been at the Brown School for 31 years, joining the faculty in 1991. He earned his MSW with a mental health concentration from San Diego State University School of Social Work. He later earned his doctoral degree in social welfare at the University of California, Los Angeles School of Social Welfare. After Brett earned his MSW, he worked for 3 years for the San Diego County Child Protective Services Emergency Response Division. His role was an immediate response worker in which he provided immediate intervention in emergency cases where he believed that a child may be endangered. His job was to provide initial crisis services and referral to the appropriate local agencies or systems. This experience, among other factors, led him to pursue a PhD. Brett is a national leader in obtaining, managing, and analyzing cross-sector data in the area of child and family studies, particularly in the area of front-end child welfare. In conjunction with his colleague and wife, Melissa Johnson-Reed, he created a longitudinal cross-sector linked database using statewide data in Missouri, which has served as a basis for several R01 level grants related to child maltreatment. For the past 20 years, Brett has been among the nation's foremost experts on the use of administrative data in social service research. He has received R01 funding, created a comprehensive state database from Missouri data, and has many publications providing empirically based answers to practical and theoretical questions. His work in this area is ongoing, with current work focusing on practical applications of statewide data, including virtual comparison groups. In a broader sense, he has been among the leaders generally in setting benchmarks in child welfare epidemiology. He has written the first published works in several key areas, including the first ever estimate of the lifetime prevalence of child maltreatment investigations, the first ever comprehensive analysis of cross-type maltreatment, the first ever national level analysis of surveillance bias in child maltreatment reporting, and the first ever test of the bias model of racial disparities in child protective services at the national level. Brett has dozens of publications in these areas, both in specialty journals like Child Maltreatment and in higher profile general interest journals like Pediatrics. He is also first author on a popular research methods textbook, Social Research Methods from Conceptualization to Dissemination, which he co-authored again with his wife and colleague, my dear friend, Dr. Melissa Johnson-Reed. And he also is a co-author with Melissa of After the Cradle Falls, a book that is an overview of child maltreatment and the American Child Protective Services system aimed at a general audience. He currently teaches at the PhD level in data management at the Brown School, a course which also draws students from other departments across Washington University. Professor Drake has served as an advisor, consultant, or expert panelist on the use of administrative data to the Casey Foundation, the Pew Charitable Trust, the state of Missouri, and has twice lectured at the Harvard Law School on the issue. His work also includes the creation of a virtual comparison group generator based on a simulated child welfare database funded by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. I have had the pleasure of working with Brett for over 2 decades at the Brown School, and I've learned a few things over that 23 years. One, he really loves ginger. This is a time when we're really trying to acknowledge and honor Brett, and if you were really stumped on what you could possibly do to express your admiration of him, think of a really creative gift that involves ginger in some form, and you will bring great joy to his life. This is a goal that I have every time Christmas or his birthday rolls around. What new form of ginger can I bring to Brett? Most recently, I was so pleased with myself because I stumbled upon licorice ginger flavored with a licorice that was the flavor of ginger. I'd never seen this before. So I taped it to his door, and he found it and sent me a nice note expressing gratitude and describing to me how strange and odd it was. And you know, so I felt very satisfied with myself over that particular purchase. He also is a lover of a good debate. He enjoys this with great relish. And I have been a collaborator in this process with him since I interviewed for my first job here at the Brown School. In my job talk, among the most challenging questions I received in the talk came from Dr. Drake, which was both stimulating for me and a challenge, of course, followed by many conversations later where he would share with people how much he really enjoyed my talk. One of the things that has been a beauty over 23 years of debating Brett, and I kid you not, it has been 23 years of debating Brett, One of the gifts has been that he holds the process very, very dear, but not nearly as dearly as he holds the relationships of the people in which he is debating. And it's a principle for him and a value that I really deeply respect and appreciate about him. He is also someone who believes deeply in science, and that is what fuels his love of debates. He wants us to be scientifically driven in the decisions that we make, because he knows firsthand, as you heard, from the practice experiences he has about what's at stake. And what's at stake are human beings' lives, and in his case, the lives of small children. So he is a lover of science. And because of that, I can think of no other person and no better chair for that would be suited for Professor Brake than the one he is about to receive. So please, at this time, join me in welcoming our provost, Provost Wendland, and Professor Drake to come forward and proceed with the installation.
All right. Brett Drake, I officially name you today and forevermore the Professor of Data Science for the Social Good in Practice. And Brett, I am honored to present you with a medallion that reads on the front, Brett Drake, April 13th, 2022. Oops, that's on the back actually, right? And on the reverse, it says Professor of Data Science for the Social Good in Practice. Makes it a little easier. Okay. So it is my honor and my privilege to introduce Brett Drake, Professor of Data Science for the Social Good in Practice. And he is now going to present his chair address, which is titled Harnessing Big Data for the Social Good, Next Steps. And I'm very excited to hear your presentation. And congratulations, very proud of you.
Well, thank you all. And yeah, Tanya's job talk was the best mixed methods presentation I've ever seen in my life. First, I'd like to say some thank yous. Thank you to those of you responsible for giving me this honor. Perhaps most importantly, I'd like to thank the institution, both the university and the school, for providing me with an extraordinary 30 years. I've been able to do my work. I've been surrounded by kind, brilliant people, faculty, staff, students, and it's been absolutely extraordinary. So thank you to the institution. More specifically, I'd like to thank my family, my two wonderful sons who have made my life rich and full and wonderful. And my friends, many of whom are here, Dean Cronin, who was with me from the very beginning, and perhaps most importantly, my wife, Melissa. I'm going to be saying I a lot during this talk, but it's not really true. I should be saying we, because everything that's important about my research, Melissa's had a hand in. And everything that's important about my life, she's had a hand in. And she's made my life wonderful. So thank you. I begin every class I teach with a story time, where I try and tell a story hoping students will remember it, and it's always something about the course. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell you a story about big data. And this story starts with me at a conference, listening to a presentation that is being given by a brilliant scientist who is now at Illinois, but was then my student, named Hyunil Kim. And Hugh Neal and I were presenting the first ever estimate of how many kids ever have child welfare services contact. We didn't know this. We didn't know the answer to the question. If 100 kids turn 18, how many of them will have been contacted by Child Protective Services? Turns out the number is over 30%. It's much higher than anyone thought. And so we were pretty proud of ourselves and thought we were going to shake up the world a little bit and give this cool presentation. And so HK was doing that, and I was sitting in the audience, and someone present was a woman named Emily Putnam Hornstein, who is one of the very top experts in this area, was at USC, is now at UNC. And we thought she'd be pretty excited about what we had to say. So I was like kind of watching her while HK was giving the talk, and she was ignoring us. She was looking at her laptop, which was out on her lap. And she had a colleague next to her who also had a laptop out, and they were whispering frantically back and forth to each other. And so I was quite amazed. I was like, why is she ignoring us? What's going on? And then after the meeting in the hallway, which of course is where everything interesting happens at conferences, Emily came up to us and she said, I have good news for you. And I said, what's that? She said, I replicated your study, and I found basically the same thing you found. So Emily had replicated months and months and months of our work, and had done it while HK was showing the results during the meeting. So you probably are having a couple of reactions to this. Your first reaction, of course, is, why am I up here getting this award? Why isn't Emily getting an award? But probably your second reaction is, how does that happen? How can you do that quickly? What is that about? Because we're used to looking for knowledge in books and in journal articles and in places like that. We're not used to people reaching live into the stream of data and pulling up answers as if you were scooping water out of a stream and drinking it in real time. But that's what she had done. And that's the world we're in now. And this is what excites me about the work I do, and that many of the rest of us are doing here at WashU, that we are in a genuinely new time in the experience of the human race, when we can do something that was not possible before. I don't have the answer to this question, by the way. I don't know what data science is. Some people say it's a sub-branch of computer science. Some people say it's a sub-branch of statistics. Some people say it's characterized by the use of large data sets. Some say it's characterized by the use of complex algorithms. I can tell you how I do it, though. For me, data science is a kind of science. You need a question. You need to know where you can get some information. Oops. You need to get the information. Now, 4 might be new to you. You need to sanity check the data. This is critical, and I'm going to talk a lot about this. You need to analyze the data. For many data scientists, this is their core focus. There are several people in this room who have forgotten more than I know about advanced analytic techniques. Washington University has an embarrassment of people who can do a wonderful job at stage 5. But that's not what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be focusing on these 4 things, because I think the next steps in big data, at least in my field, are maybe looking at the steps we just took and making sure that we're doing them correctly. Because science is a powerful tool, and people listen to us, particularly in my field for some reason, and what we do changes people's lives, and we need to be responsible. And I'm a little worried about how we're moving forward right now. There's lots of kinds of knowledge. This is my favorite kind. I started this talk with a story. Stories are great. People learned how to write things down and preserve information over time. Then it got easier to get that information out to people. And now people knew how to read, and people could understand the world. And gradually, not as quickly as you would have hoped, knowledge became democratized and started to move out to the people. And then computers showed up. And this is the big change in this story, because computers can store a lot of information and they can analyze it fast. Melissa and I were doing this in the mid-1990s, when you had to spend about 1/3 of a professor's yearly salary to get 8 gig of memory. And that really meant that for all but a few fanatical people, data science was not possible. In my opinion, It became possible around 2005. That's when there were enough computers with enough processing speed. Melissa and I would run programs that she wrote that took months to run. And if there was weather like today and you had a power outage, you had to restart the program. But now it runs in 40 seconds. Very different world. Of course, with the internet, you can know what data are available and you can get them quickly. So how do we know it's true? It's the most important question a university can approach. You can ask experts, you can read a book, you can look at an article, but I would say that now we can do what Emily did. We can consult the data directly without intermediary. The democratization of this, the social justice implications of this are staggering. But you're thinking, Brett, you know, not everyone has access to the data like you or Emily do. Surely this is ridiculous. Here's an example. If you move to a new area, you may very well, without my mentioning this at all, know that you can pull up a crime map of the area you wish to move to. This is real, live, almost raw data that any human being can access and use as a tool to make themselves safer and to make their lives better. This is centered on my house, and those little blue dots are nothing to worry about. Those are mostly things like fallen trees and stuff like that. So I live in a fairly safe area in Webster Groves. But this is an example of how this is beginning to get into our everyday lives. And there's lots of, many of you check the CDC website, you look at the COVID trackers, you see what's going on. So this isn't new. I'm going to suggest that we start to see big data as a teenager. And when I think of teenagers, I think of two things. I think of nearly unlimited potential, and I think that sometimes mistakes happen around them. And so those are the two parts of this talk, the potential and the mistakes. I think we're at a little bit of an awkward stage. And most of what I'm telling you comes from my reading things in my field, in child maltreatment big data. So this may not be anywhere near as true as other fields of big data, but this is what it looks like from child welfare. So I have a fun story I'd like to tell you. This is what some people call type 2 fun, but there's a good ending. So this story is meant to reinforce the idea of sanity checks. Steven Pinker's a big fan of this. Someone says to you, how long is it going to take me to drive to Kansas City? What is that, like 6, 8 hours? And you think, well, I don't know, but I know it's 2 hours to Columbia, and Columbia's halfway there. So I'm thinking it's about 4 hours. So I think this guy's probably wrong with the 8-hour estimate. That's a sanity check, okay? This is a data set. Believe it or not, every child maltreatment report in the United States eventually ends up in a computer at Cornell, and you can download it if you're a doctoral student or a researcher or someone else who has a reasonable desire to do this. And it's de-identified, so there are limited concerns in terms of confidentiality. And one of the things, if you're a child welfare worker that you know, or a supervisor, or a policymaker, or a professor, is that poverty is important. There are a lot of poor people who come into contact with the child welfare system. And so you want to control for that in any analysis. Hey, there's a variable in there, you're good. FC public, family characteristic public. Does the kid have public assistance? Yes, it looks very official. It looks very cool. And so people are going in here and they are using this variable and they are partying with it. So I went around last week and I grabbed some articles that had done this, and I selected the articles based on the quality of the institution. And when I say elite institution, I mean top 3. So in medicine, we're talking like Johns Hopkins, okay? These are awesome places. And then this is kind of my subjective view of the journal quality. And these are some variables they used and what their estimates are. So this elite medical journal, in a elite medical school in a very good journal, I wanted to actually show you the articles, but Melissa wouldn't let me. Something about lifelong enemies and stuff like that. Anyway, so we find that these numbers are low. They're in the less than 20% range. I show these to my students who have background in child welfare, and they look at them and they frown and they look at me and they say, those numbers aren't possible. And so I had some concerns about these numbers. So I thought, let's do a sanity check. Well, we know that 1 in 4 of all children, not children going to CPS, all children get public assistance. And these numbers are lower than that. That's scary. And NSCOL, which is a pretty good big study where they went on, they talked to a bunch of people, found that of the CPS families they interviewed, 57% were below the poverty line and 80% were still pretty darn poor. So poverty is by far the norm among a child welfare clientele. These numbers are wrong. There are 10 to 20 articles using these numbers in their statistical models, doing all kinds of fancy computations, and these numbers are frankly garbage. They are unusable. So the question now, of course, is how does this happen? How do these elite professors from Harvard or Johns Hopkins or some other place make these mistakes? How does it happen? So the way you find out is by looking at the data, by tearing it apart into little tiny pieces and seeing what happens. So I have access to these data, and this is what you find. If you look at the state of Colorado, you will see that 100% of the kids in Colorado were reported as not being on public assistance. 3% of the kids in Connecticut were reported as not being on public assistance. And this is, I love this so much. In the District of Columbia, 1 kid out of 10,000 was on public assistance. That's probably a keyboard error. So, but if you look at Delaware, the number is plausible. Florida, not so much. So if you take a little care and you look at the data carefully, you can very easily see what's going on. A lot of states just blow this off. And I happen to know the people at Cornell, and they have their hands full quality assuring the absolute key central variables. And so they just don't have time to deal with this. And that's how this happens. But what scares the hell out of me is that brilliant researchers are just using these data as if they were real. And then if that doesn't scare you enough, probably 3 or 4 peer reviewers looked at those 17% numbers and said, yep, thumbs up, good job. If there's a hell for data analysis, and there's an arch demon in that hell, his name is GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. This is a very serious problem. Why didn't they check the data? This is just my opinion. I think they were used to doing classic research. I think they were used to doing 20th century research. And I think that's how they've been trained and how they've been brought up. And I think that those were their reflexes. An embarrassing amount of what we intellectual professors do is muscle memory and tradition and the sorts of things you would have learned as an apprentice wheelwright in the 1600s. We do things because we learned to do them that way. And I think we need new reflexes and instincts and customs to try and understand how we can interface with these data. It's the information age. It's a new age. We need new skills. Paradoxically, the more we geek out and start doing all these unbelievably complicated analyses, the more important it is to be grounded in the field. I am proud to say that I was not able to find a single paper from a major American school of social work that screwed up those variables. Yay, we be bad. And before you clap too much, I want you to imagine what would happen if I did a big data analysis of surgical data, right? So I think you need someone who's really grounded in the field. And I think that's important. So the more further away we get from reality, Kant said this, the further away you get from reality, the more you need to anchor yourself back to some direct empirical observations and someone who actually knows what's going on. And we have some faculty at this school who do not have social work backgrounds, who do awesome child welfare work because they've been super responsible about taking the time to learn what's actually going on. So yay, love sanity checks. If I had my way, I would require that for every 2 hours a student spent in a classroom learning data analysis, they spent 1 hour learning advanced data management techniques. Because I think that's where a lot of the open field is for us to make real breakthroughs. I mean, I have this conversation all the time. Hey, what are you doing? Well, we just did a major child welfare study in St. Louis. Oh, that's awesome. Did you get any community variables? No, well, we didn't have time for that. We wanted to include them, but that was another half hour of questions. Do you have zip codes? Yeah, we have zip codes. Would you like me to append census data that'll show you the community's income, racial composition, Gini inequality coefficient, education level, all that stuff. Can you do that? Well, yes, yeah, that's easy, no problem. Okay, these are brilliant 180 IQ people. They just aren't familiar with these opportunities that exist. Yes, it's dead easy. We're in the information age. So what would be a happy ending for this story? I've been focusing on the red part, but there's green parts too. There's awareness of what's out there. People don't know what's available in data. There's something called MICA. If you want to know what proportion of 19-year-old pregnancy mothers in Kirkwood on public assistance didn't start their prenatal care until the 3rd trimester, that number's in MICA. And you can not only get that number, but you get a whole big, beautiful table that will give you that for the whole state going back a long ways. So there's just insane data out there and no one's really noticed yet. Here's an article that the part of our squad did. By the way, every article that was cited in my introduction, Melissa was on. So again, this isn't an I thing, this is a we thing. Okay, so yay, go team. We looked at that data and we backed away. We're like, whoa, can't do this. And so then what we did is we said, okay, we know what counties they're in and we can generate a same race county economic indicator. We would have much rather had tracks or zip codes, but we didn't. And this worked out pretty well. And we got curves that look just like the curves you get when you have individual level data. So awesome sauce. That's one way out. Find a way around it. But you're thinking, Brett, you're kind of an idiot. Why didn't you take the obvious way out? Delaware was cool. Why didn't you just look at Delaware? And we did that too. We looked at the states that in that year had valid data, which were Missouri, New Hampshire, Michigan, and Idaho. And we looked at those states and we confirmed that what we did using the census data got the same results when you looked at those individual states. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. You all know this principle. Literally everyone in this room knows this principle. Can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find that you get what you need. There's a lot of stuff out there, right? If you can't do a study in Missouri, can you do it in Idaho? Do they have a better data set? So I'm going to give you some quick examples that kind of show you what I think some broader creative things are that we can do with big data nowadays. Okay, standard disclaimer. By the way, interesting little geeky methodology point. Correlation doesn't prove causality, but a lack of correlation can disprove causality. So you can make causal determinations from correlation. You just can't make positive because correlation requires association. I mean, we could argue about things like suppressor variables and stuff, but really, this is, as a principle pretty much holds, you can disprove things through correlational analyses. Okay, so I teach these classes and I teach research methods classes and I always require the students complete a research methods project all the way through because I think that's how you learn is by doing. There's famous proverbs about this. And so my students wanted to know, if you live in a food desert, do you have a higher chance of being hospitalized for diabetes? So instead of getting a multi-million-dollar grant and going and doing this, I just pointed them to some data sets and they did it. It was easy. The USDA has a list of zip codes with information about whether they're in a food desert or not. You can look up census data for zip codes. It's incredibly explanatory of diabetes. If you know the quality and the characteristics of a given area, you can predict a lot about what's going to happen diabetes-wise. And then where do you get rates of hospitalization? Well, we got it from MICA. You can go to MICA, you can see how many people are hospitalized for diabetes. This sort of thing is tricky because sometimes the data is good and sometimes it's bad. So like, let's say you want to know about violence in a community. I would be very suspect if you look at a whole range of injuries of violence in a community, because maybe rich people go to different places, they have different treatment trajectories. You know, maybe if I'm poor, I'm more likely to just let it sit. So there's lots of confounds, but there are ways out of that too. Like maybe you just look at gunshot injuries. It's probable that most people with gunshot injuries are going to get treatment. So you know, there's lots of ways that you have to kind of think your way through these data. What makes sense? My favorite kind of validity is face validity. And it's the one we look at the least. We look at comparative validity, predictive validity, concurrent validity, all these other kinds of validity. I like face validity. Does it make sense? So what they did is they got all these data and they put them in a computer and they mixed it up, and I helped them run the multivariate analysis. And they found that the control variables explain 60% of the variance, but putting in the food desert pumped it up to 63. Now you may be, Brett, that's only 63%. I'm not impressed. But those of you who do this sort of thing know that once you've got a lot of variance explained, it's actually quite hard to add additional explained variance. So this was a pretty fun and impressive study. They probably could have gotten this published. This is one of my favorite studies that my students ever did. One of my students was a member of a northern state Indian tribe, and the council of the tribe came to my student and they said, "We're worried about something and we'd like you to have a look at it." And they said, we give out checks every month, say the 15th of each month, I don't remember. And we're concerned that people are using this to purchase alcohol and they get in trouble. And we're concerned that our checks might be killing our tribal members because it might cause increased accidents. Now, I don't know what the backstory is, but it's entirely plausible that there may have been an event known to someone on the council where something like this happened. Or maybe they were just worried about it. And so they asked the student for help. Now think about how easy this is to do. My students said, "Well, when do you give out the checks?" And they said, "Well, like the 15th of each month." And then my student was able to find a highway patrol data set that was public domain that showed when the accidents were in that county. Now, fortunately, that county's population was like 60 or 70% native. So it wasn't just a little part of the county that would have been washed out. If it would have only been a small part of the population, they couldn't have done this. So they did this, and all they did statistically is they just made a big histogram, and they showed when the accidents were, and they showed when the disbursement dates were, and there did not appear to be any correlation. There was no spike on those days. So they were able to take that information back to the tribal council. So one of the reasons I like this example is this is very much something a motivated person could do with almost no education. This is the sort of power to the people, get the tools into the hands of the folks who in the past haven't been the stewards of knowledge, and maybe let them do some exciting stuff. I think that's what social justice is. Okay, first year MSW students, yay. You know, the biggest gift I gave them was just saying, look at the world. That was really how I earned my paycheck. It's out there, go find it. They did. They've done all kinds of amazing stuff. The relationship between war and STIs in Africa, just an amazing amount of fun stuff I never would have thought of. Again, creativity and potential. I am super, super, super enthusiastic and excited about the world we're moving into. It's just great. Okay, so I didn't want to come up here and say, well, this is the project I'm working on today and try and bore you to death with the intricacies of my current project. But I am going to show you two things I'm doing, because these are two things I'm doing to try and take that information and get it further down the ladder. Now, these don't get it all the way down to the people, but they do get it down a little bit. Okay, data smart. We have this project where we're creating a common data structure. So if you go to, like, see the different colored things. So like if you go to North Carolina data, it's in North Carolinaese. So like the child identifier variable is called ID, child. But if you go to Alaska, it's like child ID. And somewhere else it's CID. In the national data, it's CHID. So they all have the same variables, but they're all different names. And sometimes they're in different formats. Sometimes they're wide, sometimes they're long formats. So what we do in DataSmart is we've created a single shared Esperanto kind of language. So yeah, someone remembers that. Didn't that go well? Hopefully this will go better. Okay, so so North Carolina moves theirs so they're all child ID, and Alaska moves them also, they're all child ID. And we happen to be working with the absolute best child welfare researchers in the world on this project. And what we're hoping will happen, we're not there yet, is that these awesome sauce researchers can make awesome sauce analytic programs, and then these states can all just plug and play them. Now, of course, one of the great demons for research in general are human subjects and confidentiality concerns. The data never leave the state. We get them to convert their data set, we send them the program, or they pull it down off a website, and they just do it within their state. No human subjects issues, zero. So, so this is one of the things we're trying to do. And so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to democratize the analysis of data to states. And I'm especially excited about getting this sort of thing to states like Wyoming. Wyoming has a population not too much bigger than the city of St. Louis, not the county, the city of St. Louis. And I doubt they have the resources to do stuff like this. So, and we tend to leave rural areas behind in our work. And so I'm hoping that maybe this can help with that. So we're super excited about that. That's an example of a common data structure. Child sex, 1, 2. It's pretty simple. Here's another project we're doing. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I looked at the all the data we have on child abuse hotline reports, and I said, wow, that's a lot of data. That's pretty cool. And then I looked at all the stuff we had on foster care reports, and I noticed that no one had ever done a study linking both these data sets over time. So you could see the links like this, but you couldn't see the links like this. And so I'm like, oh, that's easy. So I thought, you know, I'll take a month or two. 4 years later, I was so far over my head that I was screaming to my friend HK to save me. And then we have also been, by the way, he analyzed my work and said it was 97.5% correct, which is pretty good. By the way, Brett's law of big data, in big data, you never get anything perfectly right. But in big data, if you're good and you're careful, you will rarely make big mistakes. So that's kind of what that's about. Anyway, so we have this program that we've written now, and it's worked, and we've got a publication on it and stuff that actually ties all this together. So instead of researchers having to go out and look at every one of these files and download them and mess with them and fix the paradoxes between them and all that stuff, our program takes all these files and puts them into one file. So you have the entire history of every kid in America, boom, just in one file. It's 130 gig of data, but 52 million records. So there are problems actually that we still have to deal with in terms of usability. But again, we're not giving out this confidential data to people. We're giving them a program so they can get permission to do this, and then they can just execute it themselves. So we're pretty excited about this as a way to help. In this case, unfortunately, the only penetration we're getting down to researchers. But as you've noticed, I'm a little suspicious of some of the researchers and some of the findings they have. So we have lots of cool little stuff embedded in this that does it right, so that it's less likely that people are going to screw some of these things up. So we're, for example, the census data is pre-done and attached to it. We're trying to make it better. Okay. I think we're in the awkward teenage years of big data. I think we need to develop reflexes and you know, when you think about it, we always assume that technology follows skills. I think skills follow technology. When I was my son's age, I knew almost no one who could type well. I suspect now among people my son's age, almost every one of them knows to type better than almost anyone I knew at my age, because you need to now, because the world has changed and skills follow technology. And so I'm very, very, very hopeful about where we're going in the next 10 or 20 years. I think a lot of the things that I'm kind of seeing as visionary things that might seem like big lifts are just going to happen naturally. People are going to be like, well, where is my information on this? Where's the website I can go to track what's happening in my community? People are starting to ask that. So there's going to be a demand for this. And I think it's going to happen naturally. And I think it's absolutely wonderful. And I think that we have a glorious blank canvas in front of us. You guys know about the Prius study? How many people know Prius study? These people tried to figure out why people were buying Priuses, and the only information they had were car sales and voting patterns. And what they found was that the Prius was the electric car that people could tell, oh, he's driving an electric car. The other cars kind of looked like all the other cars around. And what they found was that in places with extremely left-leaning political voting records, the proportion of electric cars that were Priuses were super high. Because people didn't just want an electric car, they wanted an electric car that said, I've got an electric car. And the people in the conservative areas were like, got an electric car. And it just looks like your car, nothing to see here. So they did this amazing study and developed this whole idea of sort of this human tendency to show your credibility along certain political dimensions by your purchases. And all they needed were those two data sets. How many Priuses get sold in what places, and what's the voting record from those places? It's just amazing what you can do. I think when people ask me what social work I say social work is helping people, especially the people who need help the most. That's what I think social good is. I think that's helping people, particularly the people who need help the most. How can we do that? We can democratize data downwards. Lots of people are doing a great job on this. I'm only doing a tiny, tiny, tiny part of this, and I'm so excited about it. We have people here who are doing a great job of this. Number two, there are a surprisingly large number of toxic misperceptions, things that everyone knows are true that aren't, and they're hurting people. I'll give you a classic example in my field. In my field, for political reasons, we attempted to disconnect child maltreatment from poverty, because when the initial legislation came out, everyone had war on poverty fatigue. So they explicitly tried to move child maltreatment away from poverty and disregard linkages between it. The problem is that there is, in fact, a strong link between child maltreatment and poverty. It is much harder to do a good job in any phase of your life when you are suffering bone-crushing poverty. So what happened? Since it was not cool to think of child welfare and poverty as related, we started going out to someone who's getting evicted from their house and giving them parenting classes. Okay, that's not super smart. What's super smart is to remember that triangle thing all of you psych majors learned in college, right? Remember Maslow? And to really start where the client is, which is something we like to say, and acknowledge the struggles that these people are suffering and deal with the problems that they really have. But we didn't do that for like 30 years because we made a decision to deceive ourselves. And this was a crime. Now, yay, good news. In about the last 10 to 15 years, we're doing a much better job acknowledging the link between child maltreatment and poverty. And we're starting to change some of our interventions to be more focused on material hardships. And those interventions seem generally to be working. So yay, good news. And I'm proud to say that a lot of the reason we changed our view on that is because the big data showed up and just made it impossible to deny this. I was actually screamed at in the Berkeley faculty commons in like 1997 for advancing the idea that poverty and child maltreatment were related, because I was seen as piling on and blaming the victim. So yay, we seem to be making some advances in some areas. That's good. Okay. Finally, we can answer key policy relevant questions very fast. When I'm talking to other researchers now in Zoom meetings, I've got the NCANS data up, and someone will say something like, well, do you think that the reason Hispanics look different on this axis is because they're in different kinds of placements? Okay, here's a table showing Hispanics and what kind of placements. I do this in real time during our conversations. It's that easy. We should all be doing this. Our brains should be connected to the data, not just reflecting what we read in journal articles. So we all need to become kind of cybernetic organisms and know how to access this in real time. So I think that's what I'd like to see happen. Now, at the risk of ending this talk on a bit of a down note, I felt uncomfortable not at least mentioning what's happening in the world. And I wanted to extend my personal thanks to those of you who are able to use your own resources to help people who are going through unimaginable horrors right now. So thank you very much to those of you who have been able to help in this regard. So thank you for showing up and listening to what I have to say.
So I'm not sure that that was quite enough. Can we thank Brett for those amazing remarks and sharing your wisdom with so many? So as I close, Dr. Drake, I want to just acknowledge that planning for this day took some time, and then COVID-19 took an even longer time. Thank you for the work that you've done. Brett is really one of the few people that I know that can harness big data, understand technology, understand the merging and data management they talked about, and center humans in that work. And so we're grateful that you do so much for this profession, for this university, for the humans. We admire you a great deal. And over what I hope will be drinks and some cookies, because now we are together, we can ask Brett some questions and really get to know him. And can I just say to your kids, you have some pretty cool parents here. And so please, please extend a very warm Brown School and Washington University welcome to the entire family. This is a big day. Congratulations. Thank you, Brett, for all that you do. Thank you.